This place is 1,000 kilometers away from the trenches in Ukraine. It is located at the edge of the Finnish border and is the heart of the waterways used by Putin's most trusted nuclear submarines, stretching from St. Petersburg to the Caspian Sea. Until yesterday, this place was Russia's impregnable fortress. Now, it is the newest and most unimaginable front in the war. Right here, Ukrainian special forces dealt another heavy blow to the Russian Navy. The Ukrainian Special Operations Forces announced on October 4th that they had struck a Russian Buyan M-class small missile ship carrying Caliber cruise missiles in Russia's Republic of Karelia. According to the SSO, the Russian missile ship Grad was sunk in Lake Onega in the Republic of Karelia at 0431 local time on October 4th. In its statement, the SSO said, the missile carrier was sailing from the Baltic Sea towards the Caspian Sea. The damage occurred on the right side of the ship's power unit compartment. This high-profile ship has a range of 2,500 kilometers and can carry missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. However, this attack was not just about striking a ship. It was the moment of collapse for Russia's centuries-old strategic depth doctrine, the fantasy of keeping the enemy far from its own territory. The fact that such a high-profile target could be targeted and hit in an inland lake, thousands of kilometers away from the Black Sea, the main theater of war, is the first clue to the panic experienced by the Kremlin. Russia's lakes and inland waters, where it even hides its nuclear submarines, are now targets. The waterway to St. Petersburg and the Caspian Sea is now a death trap. This is the moment when the walls of the Kremlin's most protected castle were torn down. The safe harbor myth is now gone. To better understand the magnitude of this strategic earthquake, we must first set the scene correctly. Lake Onega is no ordinary body of water. It is the aorta of Russia's northern military architecture. It is the very heart of the critical White Sea-Baltic Canal, which connects Murmansk, home to Russia's Northern Fleet nuclear submarines, to the Baltic Sea via St. Petersburg. The complex canal system you see on screen is known as the White Sea-Baltic Canal. This is a 227-kilometer engineering marvel, built in the 20th century with the blood and sweat of tens of thousands of Gulag prisoners, connecting the cold waters of the Arctic Ocean to the Baltic Sea via St. Petersburg. Open-source maritime data confirms that this canal is a dual-purpose superhighway for Russia. While commercial goods like timber and minerals are transported on one hand, far more deadly cargoes use this route on the other. According to reports from Western intelligence sources, all military vessels less than 50 meters wide, including nuclear submarines belonging to Russia's Northern Fleet, use this inland waterway to avoid NATO waters controlled by Norway and the UK. In short, this canal is a strategic bypass that allows Russia to relocate its northern nuclear strike force, hiding it from the rest of the world. The Kremlin thought it had hidden one of its most valuable hunters in its safest harbor. It was wrong. Lake Onega is the most critical junction of this bypass, its widest and most vulnerable point, and Ukraine has plunged its dagger precisely into this spot. The shock waves from the explosion on Lake Onega not only shattered the hull of the ship, they also demolished a centuries-old myth that formed the foundation of Russian military thinking, the strategic depth narrative. This narrative has always been the Kremlin's greatest assurance, from Tsarist Russia to the Soviet Union and Putin's Russia. The idea was simple. Russia is so vast that no enemy army can reach its heart without being logistically exhausted or succumbing to the merciless Russian winter. Napoleon's Grande Armée melted away before Moscow. Hitler's panzer divisions froze in the ruins of Stalingrad. This vast geography has always been Russia's greatest armor. War was always fought there, beyond the borders, while the homeland remained here, safe. The bombing of the Crimean Bridge was the first crack in this doctrine. Drones falling on Moscow deepened this crack. However, the destruction of a cruise missile ship on Lake Onega is the final nail in the coffin of this doctrine. This attack proves that modern warfare renders geography meaningless. The front line has now become a fluid and invisible network, stretching from Ukrainian trenches to Russia's northernmost ports, Siberian railways, and Putin's supposedly most secure inland lakes. Strategic depth is no longer armor. It is a vast, impossible-to-protect area of vulnerability. Russia's greatest advantage has become its greatest curse. The illusion of a safe zone has been devastated. Immediately following this military doctrinal collapse, a far more dangerous second-wave effect begins to spread. Psychological collapse. The real target of this attack is not the metal hull of the Grad ship, but the minds of the Russian elite and the people. This is a new and much more ruthless chapter in psychological warfare. Until now, especially for decision-makers and wealthy elites in Moscow and St. Petersburg, the war was a distant problem experienced by others in Donbass, watched on television screens. As long as their luxurious lives, yachts, Western-style cafes, and stable order continued, they couldn't care less about what the Kremlin was doing in Ukraine. The Lake Onega attack burst this comfortable bubble like a needle. Look at the map again. Onega is practically the backyard of St. Petersburg, Russia's cultural and economic second capital, the hometown of Putin and today's ruling class. These elites must now face the reality that the region where they have their summer dachas, where they sail and find peace, has turned into a war zone. The war is no longer on television because the war has knocked on their own doors. This is the moment when the illusion that stability and security can be bought has ended. This is the moment when the implicit social contract Putin offered them has been torn up. Panic begins to spread through the whispering press. If we are not safe there, we are not safe anywhere. This panic pushes the Kremlin into an unsolvable dilemma, a strategic stranglehold. Putin and his generals now face an impossible choice. Will they use their limited advanced air defense systems and best troops to hold the crumbling front lines? Or will they withdraw these valuable assets from the front and deploy them to protect the vast interior, stretching thousands of kilometers? The strategic waterways, nuclear facilities, military bases, and industrial centers. It is a game in which both options lead to disaster. If they weaken the front, they open the way for Ukraine's long-awaited military breakthrough. If they leave the interior unprotected, they allow attacks like the one on Lake Onega to continue and escalate, paralyzing logistics lines and making the war felt in every corner of Russia. This is a slow and painful strangulation process that crushes the Russian war machine under its own weight. With a single, precise strike, Ukraine has trapped the Russian general staff in a cycle of chaos and indecision on its own maps. The Kremlin is now in a state of complete panic, because it knows that whatever move it makes, it will face a strategic checkmate at the end of the game. So how did this impossible attack happen? First of all, mistaking this ship for a simple patrol boat would be a fatal mistake. This platform is a compact but extremely dangerous assassination machine, capable of carrying 8-caliber cruise missiles in its 800-ton hull. These missiles have a range of 2,500 kilometers, can be equipped with nuclear warheads, and have extremely precise strike capabilities. The question of what such a high-profile target was doing in an inland lake thousands of kilometers away from the Black Sea, the main theater of war, provides the first clue to the panic experienced by the Kremlin. Possible scenarios include the ship being pulled into inland shipyards for repair and maintenance, or, more importantly, being removed from the Black Sea due to the growing Ukrainian threat and hidden in this safe harbor. However, this decision turned the ship into a target rather than saving it. This brings us to the million-dollar question. How did Ukraine strike this target 1,000 kilometers from the front line, deep within Russian air defenses? There are two main theories on the table, both of which are nightmare scenarios for the Russian general staff. The first theory could be called Ukraine's long arm. In recent months, open-source intelligence analysts have documented that Ukraine has developed and successfully used kamikaze drones, such as the Lyuty, with a range of over 1,000 kilometers. When examining potential flight routes on a map, it appears that these UAVs could have reached their targets by flying over Russia's sparsely populated northern regions, using corridors where air defense radars are weakest. Russia has concentrated its most advanced S-400 batteries and radar systems to protect metropolises such as Moscow and St. Petersburg and the front line along the Ukrainian border. This creates massive blind spots across the country's vast interior. Detecting a drone with a wingspan of a few meters, made of composite materials and flying close to the ground, over thousands of square kilometers of forested and marshy terrain, is like looking for a needle in a haystack. This theory is proof of how porous Russia's airspace is, and that the so-called impregnable air defense dome is actually an illusion. The second, and perhaps more daring theory, is the ghosts within scenario. According to this theory, the attack could have been carried out by Ukrainian special forces operating from within Russian territory, or by Russian partisan groups collaborating with them. This is a much more complex, and for the Kremlin, Much more frightening possibility than a simple UAV attack. This scenario could involve sabotage carried out by a smaller FPV drone or sea drone launched by an operator hidden near the water's edge. The main intelligence directorate, GUR, of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense had previously signaled similar operations targeting railway lines and military facilities within Russia. If this attack was organized from within, it would demonstrate not only a technological vulnerability, but also a total failure of the Russian security and intelligence apparatus, an act of treason, and how the home front has collapsed. This possibility will prompt the question, who is the traitor, in the corridors of the Kremlin, spark a witch hunt within the FSB, and trigger a wave of widespread internal paranoia. Whichever theory is correct, the result remains the same. Russia has been hunted down in its own home. The attack on Lake Onega is not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a domino effect that will collapse Russia's northern strategy. To understand this strategic checkmate scenario, one must look at the consequences of the incident. First, there is the Grad missile ship. This is not just a military loss, but also the destruction of a symbol. Second is the elimination of the security of the White Sea Baltic Canal. Now, every military or high-value commercial vessel using this critical waterway is a potential target. This situation will force the Russian Navy to make a decision: either take the risk of using this vital artery or be forced to sail in international waters under full NATO surveillance. Both options severely restrict Russia's military mobility in the north and halt its operational tempo, bringing it to a standstill. This means logistical strangulation of the bases in Murmansk, the heart of Russia's nuclear submarine fleet. The third consequence is economic chaos. This is also the main transport route for billions of dollars worth of natural resources exported from Russia's northern regions. Increased security risks will drive up insurance costs, deter commercial ships from using this route, and put the regional economy in a stranglehold. This means that the economic cost of the war will begin to be felt even by ordinary Russian citizens, thousands of kilometers away from the front lines. The most dangerous link in this domino effect is the opening of new fronts. The Onega attack has set a precedent for what Ukraine might target. Analysts are currently working on maps showing Russia's most vulnerable and unprotected infrastructure. The locks and dams on the map are the next potential targets. Destroying one could render the entire waterway unusable for months and cost billions of dollars to repair. Similar military vessels sailing on other inland waterways or waiting in ports. Each one is now on the target list of the next Ukrainian drone. Even more frightening are the critical rail and road bridges leading to submarine bases in Murmansk and Severodvinsk, the backbone of Russia's nuclear deterrent. The vulnerability of these targets has been confirmed by the attack on Lake Onega. Ukraine has made it clear that this is only the beginning. This leaves Russian military planners facing a terrifying reality. There is no longer a single front to defend. What must be defended is the entire country, the world's largest, spread across 11 time zones. This is a logistical nightmare that no army can achieve. Russia is trapped within its own vast geography. This new reality has the potential to fundamentally shake the Putin regime's internal front. The Kremlin's propaganda machine has for years sold the public the myth of an invincible army and impregnable borders. This narrative was one of the cornerstones of the regime's legitimacy. But now, images of a warship burning in a lake near the Finnish border expose the emptiness of this propaganda. Local Telegram channels and social media networks are overflowing with a wave of panic and questioning that official state media cannot control. Questions like, where is our air defense? How can St. Petersburg's outskirts be unprotected? And, we thought the war had nothing to do with us, now it's at our doorstep, directly target the government's authority. This is not just a military defeat, but also a crisis of reputation and trust. Each new attack further erodes the public's faith in the regime. Combined with economic hardships like gas station queues and empty supermarket shelves, this security breach could ignite a potential social explosion. Putin's greatest fear is not losing a handful of territory on the front lines, but losing the loyalty of the Russian people. The attack on Lake Onega was one of the most significant steps in turning this fear into reality. The home front is crumbling, and the Kremlin has no idea how to stop this collapse. Ultimately, Ukraine has taken the war into territory that Putin and his generals could never have foreseen or even imagined. Not with expensive and cumbersome armies, but with intelligence, courage, asymmetric tactics and technology. It has once again proven to the world that the Russian giant can be wounded in the heart, where it is most vulnerable and least expected. It is not just a corvette named Grad that sank into the cold waters of Lake Onega. Along with that ship, Russia's myth of "our fortress is impregnable," its strategic depth doctrine, and the false sense of security on the home front have also been sunk. The flames rising from Lake Onega are consuming not just a ship, but Russia's image as an invincible fortress. The war is no longer just in the muddy trenches of Donbass. It is being fought on the waterways leading to Russia's heart, on the railways crossing Siberia, and most importantly, in the minds of ordinary Russian citizens. Kiev has rewritten the rules of the game in this new war. And in this new game, Russia has nowhere to hide, no safe harbor to escape to. Russia's last refuge is now also in flames. So, what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.